Then Jesus, who, what word could I use to describe who you are?
All right, so let's just go for it here. All right, so sons, welcome back to the Way of Sonship. Here I am with a friend that you've come to know through a few of the crossroads in our journey. So, Cayce, what I want to talk about here is we've never actually had a connection prayer with Jesus over this, but the last few crossroads that we've been to, we've been discussing this idea that Jesus actually loves to ask this question of us. Who do you say that I am? And it's this incredible invitation into the intimacy that is going to help not only reframe the past, but actually give a name as we move forward into the future with him. And just as an example, years ago, I was on a plane coming back from Norway, and the first time I'd ever heard God pose this question, I'm furiously writing, like, what just happened in Norway over the last 2 to 3 weeks? I was over there on my own, and it was a season in my life where I didn't really want to go over to Norway and do ministry, but I knew that I could really be of encouragement to them. I knew that I could do some good. And so I went over, and here I am flying back, and I'm like, Jesus, what was that all about? And I felt like, as I was writing in my journal, he said, who do you say that I am? And I remembered the moment where Jesus said that to the disciples, and Peter answered, you're the Son of God. And Jesus said, blessed are you, Simon Peter, because flesh and blood didn't reveal that to you, but only my Father in heaven. And then God said, so who do you say that I am? And I thought about it, and he took me back a week prior. I was on the coast of the Barents Sea, and I was surrounded by these really softly flowing mountains, and there was rocks everywhere, and it was the most perfect, beautiful stockpile of material that I'd ever seen. And I measured stockpiles for a decade of my life. So it's a really unique language that I have with God. These perfectly round, tumbled rocks, and they were in this perfect geometric shape of a stockpile. And it was curious because I remember looking around a week before I was on the plane and going, this is just odd. Everything about this landscape is really odd. And a couple of days later, I asked somebody about it, and they said, oh, that's only possible because of a glacier that came through 1,000 years ago. A glacier, just this massive mountain of ice, came and ripped the mountain apart, and then tossed all of these stones. And as they rubbed up against one another, they became soft. And then as the ice melted, it left these deposits there. And in that moment on the plane, he reminded me of two scriptures. One of them was, for assuredly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be moved and cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that those things that he says will be done, he will have whatever he says. And then this other scripture, prepare the way of the Lord in the wilderness, make a straight highway for our God in the desert. Every valley should be lifted up, every mountain and hill be made low, and uneven ground be smooth, and the rugged land a plain. And the glory of the Lord will be revealed, and all humanity together will see it, for the mouth of the Lord has spoken. And in that moment, he just said, haven't I been a glacier to you? And I said, yes, because one of the things that only 10 years earlier, I could have, every time I looked in the mirror, I hated the prideful places in my heart, and I had contempt for what I felt was really immature, stupid places. And over the course of those years, he had just brought the mountains down and smoothed the places for me. So that's kind of my intimate story. But I know that we actually are invited to have many names for God based on all these different situations. David in the Psalms could have one sentence where he actually gives like 7 or 8 different names for God that came through experience. So, over the last couple of years, you've been so great at leading us in connection prayer to ask God some questions that might on the surface sound like, they take a retreat to go on or something, but in the moment, God's just so willing to ask for us to ask that question for him to answer. And so, um, who do you say that I am? How would you go about leading people into asking God that simple question?
That's really good. I love the question for a lot of reasons. And I think what happens when that question's asked is probably where I would go with the connection prayer of asking him that question. Um, and my first thought definitely is there in Caesarea Philippi, where Peter says you're the Christ. I just think it's such a powerful question because regardless of where you are and you're thinking about yourself or the world around you or the people you're connected with, when you can remember who God is, it's like dead center. It's the bullseye, and that space where there's these other people murmuring about Jesus. They're like, well, he may be this, he may be Elijah, he may be that, but he just goes full after who he is, who he really is. Like, you're the Messiah. And so I think that we do this in a very small way when we say, what are you grateful for? And express it in your own words back to God. So a lot of times we'll start with, Jesus, will you bring to mind a time when I felt blank? And that blank always has to do with connection. So remind me of a time when I felt safe. Remind me of a time when I felt your presence. Remind me of a time when I felt joy. Remind me of a time when I felt peace. Remind me of a memory or a time when I felt your unending love. Remind me of a time when I felt purpose. And then we just go, okay, just notice what you notice about that memory. So as I'm even saying that to you now, you may have had a couple memories pop to mind. If you just pick one of them, like a time that you felt purpose, and notice what you notice. And then what are you grateful for about that memory? So in that, it's kind of the same idea, but like, let's go harder at the question. So Jesus, where were you in that memory? And then Jesus, who were you being to me in that memory? Then Jesus, what word could I use to describe who you are today? What am I grateful for about who you are? And what did that memory remind me about who I know you to be? So, I mean, that's a way to do it through connection prayer. But I think if we're just talking right now, it's like, okay, Jay, in the last 3 days, New Year's, end of this holiday season, if you could put one word on who God has been to you, what would you use? And something may be coming to your mind, but I might go, hey, Jay, if you could put one word on the last 10 years for describing God, and just as descriptive as possible, like rock, father. I know you would use father. That's one of them, but there's many. But I think the question's so powerful and there's so many options. But then immediately after that, well, first of all, what came to your mind when I asked about the last 3 or 4 days? Who has God been to you?
Strange. Flannel.
Flannel.
Yeah.
And what does that bring up for you? Like, what's the connection there?
Yeah. Well, I just got this shirt for Christmas and I wanted this shirt. This was kind of my favorite thing. It's warm and it's super soft, super comfortable. And as I've been thinking, my son's back home from college, and there's like this a memory that I had of being a child, kind of in the Christmas season where everybody's home. And it was just a place of great safety and warmth. And I didn't actually feel that during the Christmas season, but now that it's over and all of the rigmarole of the season is done, to be here with my family on a cold day, I just feel comfort.
Mm-hmm.
And
So
warmth.
there's so much wrapped up in that. It's like It's not about even just being warm.
No.
You know, that's the superficial level of it, but it's family, it's comfort, it's presence, it's closeness, all of that. So then I'm going to ask another question. So Jesus, Jay says that you have been like flannel to him. Who do you say Jay is?
I got a picture of a bear cub.
And Jesus, what does that picture represent? What do you mean by that? So just like I just asked you what came to your mind. You said flannel, and then I said, what does that mean to you? I'm asking God for you, and he's answering you in what's coming to your mind. So we ask God, what are you calling Jay? And now we're going, God, what does that mean to you?
Well, I mean, immediately what I think of is I love to hike, and I'm always hopeful to see some wildlife. And I've never seen it personally, but you hear about how protective a mama bear is to her cub, that she'll kill you, if you threaten her cub. And I just felt like he was saying, that's how I feel about you. You're my bear cub. Yeah, that was. So I guess who would you be to me? Mama bear? That's kind of what I'm kind of hearing.
That's cool. Yeah, Jesus, what are you saying to Jay about in that picture? Who are you, God?
Yeah.
Mama cub.
Mama bear.
Yeah, it's powerful. So, I mean, that was a great example too of why I love that question so much. And you and I hadn't even talked before, but that's one of my favorite questions because it always goes back and forth like that. You know, and when Peter says, you're the Christ, you're the Son of the living God, and he says, yes, you're right, flesh and blood didn't reveal this to you, but my Father who's in heaven. And then immediately he goes, and you are Peter, and on this rock, hey, Peter, rock, and on this rock I'll build my church. And we were just having a conversation before this with a larger group about how God sees things versus how we see things. And where they were in Caesarea Philippi was like the height of like hedonism. They're on the rock where there's all kinds of awful worship. Like they have niches for phallus to be worshipped, and there's orgies going on. This is like the spring break times 1,000. It's not where these good Jewish boys should probably be, but Jesus has taken him there to talk about who he is and who they are and where exactly his church will flourish. And I just think that's so powerful because I think, our understandably human perspective would be, I'm threatened by the idea of Jesus even in this place, much less saying that this is the place where he's going to build his church. But there's so much more that comes out of this conversation about who God is and then God telling us who we are. Discovering who he is, we learn who we are. Discovering who he is, we learn who we are. It's just such a beautiful symbiotic revelation, I guess, when we start recognizing, and I guess I'm glad we're having this conversation too, because I think that me taking the time to not only be grateful, but go, this is who you are, and really own that you're reminding me of how powerful it is. Like, you're the Messiah, regardless of where we are, what's happening here, what's been done here, what's been experienced here. You're Jesus, you're the one that was prophesied about. You're not just a good teacher, you're the full-on savior of the world right here in the flesh with me.
So, this is a question that I feel like we get to keep, like he keeps asking. It's the evergreen question. Every day he can say, who do you say that I am? And he's constantly revealing more and more. So over the course of my life, the Lord's been really generous with telling me names that he has for me. And now he's inviting me as a son to start giving him names. And it's so, so valuable, because it's really easy to focus, for example, in my story, like with the glacier, it's really easy for me to focus on the mountains and think, wow, he's done it before, but I don't know that he'll do it again. But if he has a name in my story, and he's the same yesterday, today, and forever, if he was a glacier and he has ripped down mountains, that's exactly what he will do now. And it's exactly what he will do in the future. And I get to lean into that. I get to depend on it. And I can actually call him that in my prayers. But what you said is really important. I've asked this question of guys a few times, and it's actually challenging if I just say, hey, over the course of my 50 years, who has God been to me? It actually gets easier if I give it, if the Lord narrows it down to a very particular context, a very particular place in my story, like the last 3 days or the last year, or to allow Jesus to bring up a place that I felt safe or secure or at peace, or even like a time that I felt confused, and then to ask Jesus, well, where were you in that? And then to ask the question, okay, Jesus, who were you to me in that moment? So I would say, to those of you who are watching this, sons, daughters, this is a very relevant question, but be very specific about a time, and even allow God to take you to a time in your story, and then allow yourself to really be present to that place in your story, and then ask the question, where were you? What do you want me to know about that? Who were you, or who would you like for me to see you as in that portion of the story? And then, write it down. And then over the course of time, just continue gathering a list, as the Lord brings memories to you, because he'll undoubtedly bring you the obvious moments in your story, but then he'll actually bring you to these moments that you've actually wanted to forget, maybe. And he'll reorient you around the reality of where he was. So you have any other thoughts on that, Cayce?
Well, the only thing going through my mind was that as you were talking, I was remembering that before I ever did any sort of listening prayer, really one of my first times of kind of understanding how Jewish God was is understanding the difference between the way we describe people and things versus like metaphor. So like, or simile or whatever you would say. God is rock, God is shepherd, God is rain, God is mother bear cub, versus God is loving, God is good, God is kind. And those are true, all true. But God's not really a mother bear cub. But the metaphor is so powerful because it says so many different things: tender and fierce and protective and strong and all of that. And so one of the very first times I ever thought this, really, I can look back now and see how God was speaking to me, but I don't think I realized it at the time. When somebody said this, he said, close your eyes and picture God. And he's like, what do you picture when I say the word loving, kind, good? And it was kind of like real nebulous. But then he said, what about now? Shepherd, rock, water in the desert. It's just something that your mind can really start to go into the story about. And I just think that that's so powerful. So when he said that, I always think about God as rock. And one of the things that later, when I started listening a little bit more to the Lord, was that he would always say, you're a chip off the old block. And that other scripture about remember the quarry from which you were hewn. And that was so hard for me to receive for a long time, because my theology was, you're good, I'm bad. You're God's good and I'm sinful. And the thing is, yes, like I've been broken and broken so much in my life, and that's sin, that's messed up. But I'm not actually that. That's not my identity. I've always been a chip off the old block. That's what Genesis 1 tells us. We were created in the image of God. And so I'm still thinking in that space of what happens when you start to really keep asking that question about who God is you just can't help but start to understand who you are, because you are of him. You know, you are child of God. I am daughter of Mike and Lily Yates. I am daughter of God. And so the more you understand him, the more you will understand yourself correctly, you know, from this perspective that's actually truly heavenly.
Yeah, you saying that reminds me of David and the names. When David says, "You're my rock," I wonder if that's because he always remembers taking that rock and putting it in the sling and taking down Goliath and then the whole army coming down. And that's what he's thinking of. Or when he says, "You're my shelter, you're my hiding place," you know, when he went off and he ran away from King Saul and he's hiding in a cave, you know, to see that the Lord was his protector, or that he got delivered from certain death over and over again. And so he calls him my deliverer. And as you were talking, I felt like the Lord reminded me of, I think it was Elisha, who had all these young men taunting him as he was coming away from the temple, and they all got attacked by a bear and they got mauled by a bear. It's like a really strange story. But, you know, a mama bear protecting her cub. I mean, it's just kind of funny. Um, so yeah, anyway, I just thank you. I appreciate that. I think that's a really helpful, so essential. Yeah.
I'm going to say one more thing, because
Yeah.
it's the same. And it's this place where we actually can hold paradox with a picture. Because because the rock thing, like you say about the mother bear, the other vision of it is, I think that God has been the rock that I have stumbled against many times. Like, and it's not because God's a hard rock that's mean. You know, he's the rock that I'm a part of, the mother bear, but also there have been times where I've been broken in the best ways by this stumbling block. And so I again, just to the value of the metaphor and the picture that God will give us in dialogue and in experience with him, it allows for this space where it's not, oh yeah, 100%, this is it. It's actually this conversation around God's this and this. You know, there's a time for this and a time for that. And then it all has to then come down to relationship.
It seems that you know, God talks, and I think it's Revelation 2, about each of us having a stone, a white stone with a new name on it. And of course, it's a heavenly name, so it's probably not something that we could understand right now. There's probably not even a word in our vocabulary or a name in our vocabulary that we could understand it. But once we get there and everything's opened up, it's something we can fully embrace. But over time, I've learned to, I guess, see that my true name or my true identity is like some sort of a diamond with many, many facets. And every time he tells me who I am to him, I just get another facet that just continues to encourage and offer a little bit more shape and encouragement. And I think with him, you know, he begins in Exodus by saying, "My name is I am, and I'm going to leave it to you over the course of your life to go ahead and fill in the blank. I am what to you? I was what to you in this situation?" Mm-hmm. And so I think in many ways, he's allowing himself to be a very unique diamond, you know, or gemstone to us, and say, "I want you to fill in the facets so that you can see me more clearly and in a way that nobody else can." So
I love that.
Well, I think this is really helpful. I really appreciate it, Cayce. I don't want to jump off right now, but I do want to say
I keep on pushing. Sorry. Okay, we'll really say goodbye now. Thanks for the chit chat.
Yeah, and all right, son. So we'll see you at the next crossroads, and until then, be a son.